First of all, though, let's go to Oliver Dowden now, who joins me. I hope you can hear me, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your time this morning. You'll probably have seen your colleague James Heapy's opinion piece in the Sunday Telegraph this morning. He's warning that the UK is failing to prepare for war. He says that Ben Wallace, when he was Defence Secretary, tried to carry out a government-wide exercise in departments going down and working from their bunkers to see what would happen in a worst-case scenario. Why didn't the whole of government attend that exercise? In the end, it was only left to defence ministers.
Well, I don't know the specific incident that James was referring to. It is the case that we carry out wide-scale exercising programmes across government. Indeed, I did one recently for a national power outage involving several thousand different people across government, and I'll shortly be publishing the next, what we call national exercising programme for precisely these kind of exercises, preparing across a range of risks. So it is the case that the government does undertake these exercises. Indeed, I undertook one in respect of a potential terrorist incident just a few weeks ago, which ministers attended as well. But I'm afraid I don't know the exact details of the incident to which Ben Wallace and others are referring.
But it's very worrying, isn't it, for the former Veterans Minister, somebody who's worked in the Ministry of Defence, to be saying that Britain is under-defended?
Well, I don't accept that characterisation. It is certainly the case.
So James Heapy's wrong. He worked in that department.
Over the past few months and years, we have seen the risk landscape affecting the United Kingdom increasing considerably. It's certainly the worst since it's been since the Second World War. Since the Cold War, possibly since the Second World War. This is taking across a range of different issues, whether it's cyber, whether it's economic security, or whether it's conventional security, as we see in Russia, Ukraine. There are greater challenges, but we are increasing our resources to address that. For example, we set up the National Cyber Security Centre to address cyber threats. I now chair the National Security Council on Economic Security, and I take literally dozens of decisions every day on economic security to defend investments into this country from threats from hostile states and from others. And we have been at the forefront of supporting our efforts in Russia, Ukraine, supporting our Ukrainian allies.
So is James Heapy wrong?
Of course, there's more we need to do against this backdrop.
This is a former defence minister who served himself in war zones. He's a former soldier, hugely respected former veterans minister, saying this. Are you saying that James Heapy's wrong?
I don't accept the full extent of his characterisation. I looked briefly at his
So he's almost a little bit right and a little bit wrong.
Camilla, you keep talking across me, trying to turn this into a simplistic binary black and white. This is not simplistic binary black and white. We see a range of at least 4 hostile states working across a range of different medians, often in grey zone conflicts. Now, of course, there is more work that we need to do across different areas, but we have stepped up considerably our effort. I believe that we are prepared, but there is more that we need to do because this threat landscape is increasing all of the time. OK, may I pose a very, very straightforward question, which David Cameron so far doesn't seem to have answered as Foreign Secretary, but maybe you can as Deputy Prime Minister. Should we stop arms sales to Israel? No. Of course, we have to periodically review it. We're required by law to do that, as we do with all our allies, including the United States. But the Business Secretary makes decisions on that based on advice she receives from the Foreign Secretary, and that advice has not changed. OK. Another hopefully straightforward question. Is there a sense to which you think Israel under Netanyahu has gone too far in its retaliation against the October the 7th attacks? Well, it's really important to reflect. This is 6 months since those attacks. And I think it's very easy for us to think that that's ancient history. Right now, in Israel, they're a nation in trauma. It's affecting the Jewish community in this country and indeed the wider world. We should never forget the fact that Hamas conducted that appalling atrocity and have said they would do the same thing over again. It is fully legitimate for Israel to fight Hamas and stop that threat against an enemy that hides itself amongst the population. It's a difficult war to prosecute. Now, of course, Israel isn't perfect. No nation is perfect. And we were very angered by the death of those aid workers. because we think more aid should be getting into Israel. But the way we address that is by engaging with Israel, and there have been welcome steps in respect of both of those issues.
Interestingly, Tobias Ellwood was on earlier with me. I don't know if you heard that interview because I think you were doing others, Mr. Dowden, but he was saying that if it was found that Israel was in breach of humanitarian and international law, that we should stop arms sale to Israel. Do you agree with that?
Well, we have a process that we're obliged to go through. It's set out in legislation in respect of arms sales. We have some of the toughest arms sales controls in the world. And whether we're exporting to the US, to France, to any conventional allies, we do exactly the same thing. It's right that we keep that under review, and we're required to do so. But as I set out to you, the Foreign Secretary hasn't changed his advice, and therefore there's no reason for those arms exports not to continue.
Do you think that Sir Alan Duncan should be removed from the Conservative Party, expelled from the party for suggesting that Tom Tugendhat, the Security Minister, should be sacked for his support of Israel, and that Eric Pickles and Stuart Polak should be kicked out of the House of Lords?
Well, I believe he also made reference to me and to Michael Gove
Yes.
about our support for Israel as well. I'm afraid, look, I've known Alan for many years. These comments don't surprise me. I think he's totally wrong, and I think actually what he said about Stuart Pollock and Lord Pollock and Lord Pickles was offensive. I believe that CCHQ are investigating it, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Why do you say that these comments by Alan Duncan don't surprise you?
Well, because he's made similar comments for over many, many years. He's been.
Why is he still in the party then?
Vigorous in his criticism of Israel. Well, the Conservative Party has always been a very broad church, but as you know, there's this investigation going on in relation to Alan Duncan, and let's see what the outcome of that is.
On that note, with regard to some of your Conservative colleagues, is it right that William Ragg continues as Vice Chairman of the 1922, having given his own colleagues' personal telephone numbers to what appears to be some kind of honey trap scam artist?
The actions of William Ragg, or Will Ragg, were foolish, and they were wrong, and he's apologised
Shouldn't he step
for it,
down?
and it's been brought out into the public domain. No, I don't think he should step down. I think he made a stupid error.
But he's betrayed backbenchers, hasn't he? He's betrayed backbenchers, and yet he claims to represent them as Vice Chairman of the 1922 committee. Doesn't make any sense to keep him in that role, does it?
Well, as you and many of your viewers will know, the purpose of the 1922 committee is a committee of backbenchers, part of whose job really is to hold ministers to account. So I don't think it's going to be helpful for a minister to start telling the 22 committee how it should conduct its internal affairs. I've noted the fact that Will has accepted what he said was foolish, and he's apologised for it.
Is it foolish in general for MPs to be on dating apps, Mr. Dowden?
Well, it's actually quite an interesting question, Camilla. I'm happily married, so this isn't an issue that arises for me. But MPs are also entitled to have a private life and to conduct their private life. You shouldn't be forced to give up your private life in its entirety. I do think, though, it's incumbent on anyone who holds public office, whether nationally or locally, to hold themselves to a very high standard and think about the way in which they conduct themselves on those kind of sites. And Will Ragg clearly fell short of that in his conduct recently.